I can say from personal experience that we are about to hear from a journalist whose precision in research is exacting. And I will tell you from personal experience that sources and information which are protected and revealed are honored scrupulously. So it is a distinct honor and pleasure to present to you Gretchen Morgenson. Gretchen.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. So I came down this morning from New York, and I'll give you a report. It's 38 degrees. So not really a hardship. Am I going to break this thing? Not a hardship to come down to Florida in this beautiful weather. I really don't want to wreck this. Thank you. See, it's not that easy. Thank you. Perfect. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here today. When David invited me to join you, it was a thrill for me. Financial literacy is, of course, very important to me as a journalist, also as a former Wall Streeter. But when David first came to me with the idea of speaking today, he really made the focus on the First Amendment and press freedom. And of course, that won me over, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do, or have been able to do what I have done over the years since I left Wall Street long ago. I would not have been able to do any of that without the protections that we have in this country for the media. So David knew how to get me down here, and here I am. So I'd like to start today with a couple of recent headlines culled from business news pages. 1. Malaysia files criminal charges against Goldman Sachs for its role in sovereign wealth fund scandal. 2. Philadelphia sues J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and others for overcharges on city borrowing. 3. Wells Fargo charges college students 40% more on products than other large banks. Those are just 3 headlines from recent coverage. For business reporters like me, these and other articles about questionable bank practices have kept us extraordinarily busy in recent years. And yet, I like to recall that it wasn't always the case that being a financial reporter meant that you had to be something of a crime reporter. It wasn't always that I felt like I was in the cop shop, as we call it in the business. In fact, when I was at Forbes in the 80s and early 90s, I wrote a lot of articles about companies that were doing the right thing, that were thriving, their employees, their shareholders. It really was, it felt like a different era. But now it seems like every week we have some scandal that rocks the business world. So this is of interest to me. Obviously, financial scandals and crises have been with us forever. But I do believe that they've increased dramatically in pace in recent years. Now, I know I probably shouldn't complain about this because it does provide me with an endless stream of material. I don't actually have to dig too hard to get at the stories. But taking a broader look at this problem in our society, I think I really can't argue that a steady stream of financial fiascos is constructive for our country. And I also would like to note that as these events become more and more frequent and more devastating, it is even more problematic when you understand that the number of reporters out there covering them is in decline. So in a word, at a time when the financial world is increasing in complexity, the ranks of reporters who can fathom these debacles is declining. So let's talk first about what might be behind this increase in financial panics and problems that we've experienced recently. There are a lot of causes of this trend, no doubt, but I, for one, think it's not a coincidence that the frequency of financial tsunamis has grown during a period when the financial sector has been increasing in size and clout in this country. Finance and insurance firms accounted for 7.5% of gross domestic product in 2017, up from around 4% in the late 1970s. Now, as finance has come to dominate our economy, I believe that this power shift has contributed to problems that we continue to encounter even now, 10 years after the credit crunch of 2008. The financial industry's power may also have a direct relationship to the ongoing inability or unwillingness among regulators to rein in bad actors and bad practices. Of course, it's to be expected that an industry as powerful as the financial industry would like to flex its muscles to ensure that nothing threatens its profitable business models. Now, here's one way to look at how this clout comes about. According to recent figures from Americans for Financial Reform, a nonpartisan organization in Washington, the finance sector spent $719 million on lobbying and political contributions in 2017. That is a record. It translates to roughly $2 million a day, up from $1.8 million 3 years earlier. Now, these expenditures appear to have generated fairly good returns on investment. Elements of the financial reforms that had followed the conflagration of 2008 are being rolled back amid arguments from large banks and institutions that any attempt to reduce their size and interconnectedness will cripple their ability to do business and to innovate. One rollback is occurring at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, a regulator that was created in the wake of the crisis with the sole focus of policing predatory activities by financial companies. The CFPB came about to address a very serious failing in the United States regulatory regime. Previously, there was no regulator charged solely with protecting the financial consumer. As you know, the Federal Reserve watches over major banks to ensure that they are operating in a safe and sound manner. The controller of the currency does the same with smaller banks. The FDIC protects depositors with its insurance, but its main focus is on bank safety, not on protecting consumers from predatory financial practices. So this gap in the financial safety net meant that before the crisis, consumers were essentially on their own when they dealt with enormous and powerful financial institutions. If they had a complaint about a problematic practice, they had nowhere to go with it, at least on a federal basis. This was actually not just problematic for consumers. It turned out also to be disastrous for the banks themselves. Had an entity been focused on stamping out predatory practices in the mortgage arena, for instance, it would have ended up protecting the banks from themselves. They ended up, after the disaster, actually being stuck holding billions of dollars in problematic loans after the music stopped playing. So the CFPB set up shop, and after that, consumers had an entity that they could go to about a dubious deal or interaction. And they could also use the CFPB website to research financial companies' complaint records before they decided to do business with them. And since its creation, the CFPB has brought important enforcement actions against student loan companies, large banks, and insurance companies. But part of the organization is now being curbed as part of the regulatory rollback occurring across the country. One example is a CFPB initiative called the Product Sandbox. It would allow companies to create and test new financial products and services without fear of enforcement actions from the Bureau, as long as they abide by CFPB rules. Now, I believe it's a good thing to encourage financial innovation, but allowing innovation to occur without significant scrutiny has not ended well in the past. And earlier this year, 21 states and the District of Columbia expressed concern that this relaxed regulation could lead to consumer harm. Officials in those states are asking the CFPB to reevaluate the proposal, given what they call, quote, significant risks to consumers and to the entire U.S. financial system. The problem is financial companies are always one step ahead of regulators who are charged with overseeing them. And this is especially true when innovation is involved. Let's not forget that many of the financial innovations that contributed mightily to the depth and horror of the 2008 crisis had been roundly praised in the years leading up to it. Regulators exulted about collateralized debt obligations and the kind of credit insurance known as credit default swaps. These products were lauded by regulators who said that they would spread the risk among market participants, removing, therefore, the risk to bank balance sheets. But in reality, these very products amplified the mortgage meltdown and swelled its impact. They also enabled sophisticated Wall Street firms to reap enormous benefits at the expense of their customers. I would argue that the best kind of financial innovation should help society, not hurt it. Take mortgages, for example. Home loans with misleadingly low initial interest rates actually raised the risks associated with home ownership and brought woe to many borrowers. Beneficial financial innovation would have instead helped investors and borrowers reduce the risks of home ownership. There's a professor of finance at the University of Chicago's Graduate School of Business who's written extensively on this. His name is Luigi Zingales. And he's conducted a lot of research into financial innovation. He asks this simple but important question. Does finance benefit society? In most cases, the answer is yes. But there are also situations when finance provides a benefit to the few at the expense of the many. The 2008 financial crisis is Exhibit A for that situation. Ideally, financial products enhance the lives of a wide range of people. They should provide money to help Americans create wealth for their families, whether by purchasing a home, starting a business. Finance can also benefit society by enabling us to protect against the risks of everyday life. But some recent innovations in finance seem designed solely to help their creators, to feather the nests of the financiers. This trend has not gone unnoticed on Main Street. Last fall, an online survey by investing company Betterment found that, quote, 10 years after the crisis, most consumers remain deeply distrustful of Wall Street and are still working to recover financially. It's wrong to ignore the benefits of finance, but it is equally wrong to turn a blind eye to the problems, as regulators still often do. The fact is, in my reporting, I have learned and discovered that regulators are many times deeply intertwined with the entities that they are supposed to police. They are so in these entities' mindsets that they don't question their practices. Lies that made some people a lot of money were at the heart of the 2008 crisis. And because human nature never changes, they will also very likely be central to the next one. This brings me to the importance of the media. Unfortunately, for that next financial crisis, we may not get much warning because of the troubles besetting the news business. The depleted number of reporters employed in newsrooms across the country, a direct result of the imploding news media business model, means fewer bodies and fewer minds available to investigate and uncover financial mischief. One effect of this collapse in newsroom staffing has been a sharp decline in the number of accountability journalists working to hold powerful people responsible for their actions. These are the folks whose crucial work, as the saying goes, seeks to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. As the number of accountability journalists falls, it's certain that malfeasance among the political classes will rise in state houses, in city halls, and in Washington, D.C. With fewer professionals on the watch for questionable practices, it's highly likely that they are flourishing. The same goes for financial reporting. In a speech last November, Lionel Barber, editor of the Financial Times, expressed his fears on this topic. While stating that the digital revolution has led to new forms of storytelling and creativity, Mr. Barber told his audience that threats to serious financial journalism are many and formidable. Among them, he said, are the armies of public relations advisors employed by individuals and companies with very thin skins and very deep pockets. This army can use social media to attack and undermine reputations and independent journalism. Barber also cited the rising power of private markets versus public markets, which make it far harder for journalists to access information. And the encroachment of non-disclosure agreements that companies force employees to sign bring about a chilling new notion of confidentiality to many workplaces. One of these threats taken alone would be bad enough, but together they represent a dire environment in which accountability journalists must work today. Now, to Mr. Barber's dispiriting list, I will add one more challenge to accountability journalism. That is the rise of a type of journalists that I call access journalists. These are the people whose stories help hidden individuals to promote themselves and their views from behind the scenes. Access journalists are nothing new, of course, but as the newspaper business has caved in on itself, the lure of being an access journalist has never been stronger. It is far easier to write stories that benefit a powerful source than it is to do the work that requires you to battle armies of lawyers and to field enraged phone calls from high-level players. So in tandem with the sharp decline in ad revenues and profits in the media business comes the temptation to pursue stories that aren't likely to alienate advertisers or powerful readers. While I don't see this happening at the Wall Street Journal, it is a real threat to readers across the country. It could mean that they will not get the truth about questionable doings at powerful corporate entities, companies that consumers are practically forced to deal with in today's winner-take-all economy. The cost of investigative reporting, as we all know, is high. It takes time and very big money to conduct in-depth reports on barbaric working conditions in Asia, on corrupt state and local governments, on secretive corporate or government practices. We have already seen a decline in State House reporting as regional papers have been decimated by the shift to subscriber pay business models. I'm afraid that trend is only likely to continue. Now, for some financial journalists, the lure of access to the highest echelons of corporate America is very attractive. Being on a first-name basis with top CEOs seems exciting. Hobnobbing with them can seem to elevate a lowly reporter to a rarefied level. Unfortunately for readers, it is far too challenging to report truthfully from inside the tent or within the confines of the sumptuous corporate shindig. After all, you might not be invited back if you write something critical. For some, the proximity to power is irresistible. But it misses an important point, I think. For journalists who want to gain respect from the people they cover, both inside the journalistic community and out, that is far easier to achieve by being a tough but fair reporter. CEOs like Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan and Tim Sloan, late of Wells Fargo, may not love me or what I write, but I'm pretty sure they respect me. Soft stories, not the kind of stories I write. Soft stories are fun to read. Cat videos are fun to watch. But it's crucial that readers also be able to read about complex Wall Street creations that just may blow up their pensions or their 401ks. They need to know about past crises so they can be on the lookout for those coming down the pike. True financial literacy is simply not possible without an aggressive and knowledgeable business press. Readers have to be confident that someone will always be there, amply prepared to shine the light on dark corners where dubious practices flourish. Ferdinand Pecora, the firebrand prosecutor who investigated and incarcerated Wall Street in the 1930s, put it beautifully in his memoirs on the aftermath of the Great Crash. Quote, "Legal chicanery and pitch darkness were the bankers' stoutest allies. Had there been full disclosure of what was being done in furtherance of their schemes, they could not long have survived the fierce light of publicity and criticism," end quote. It could not be more crucial for journalists to keep their spotlights fierce. Whether pointed at the government or the private sector, they must always be on and always at the ready. Thank you very much for your attention.